Yeah, so I think it might be helpful to bring together a couple of threads here, right? And so when I think about prison labor, I think about four distinct elements of it. And I think it's been mentioned by a couple of different people in different ways. The first is that it's involuntary, right? So unlike you and me, like if I don't do a good job in my workplace, my boss can't deprive me of access to my family, deprive me of access to the outdoors, cut off my phone, cut off my pay, like cannot punish me in the same way, right? Radically different. The second feature is that it's unpaid or not fairly paid. And so some of the work that Terrence was talking about, that's 2 cents an hour, right? So there's a man who worked for 15 years in a Louisiana prison, and when he came home, he could buy his mom a bouquet of flowers. That's how he had $131, right? And so it's just not paid in a fair way. There's a small slice of these programs that
Mhm.
are. The third feature that I think is really important that we've talked about is that it's unprotected by the legal status. And this is where it gets to the question you had, Margie, about whether or not somebody's considered an employee. So you might go, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't somebody get the minimum wage? Because don't we have the Fair Labor Standards Act? We do have that, but courts, not legislatures, not you and I, not the people we have voted for necessarily, courts have decided that incarcerated people, by and large, not in all cases, are not employees because the purposes of their work, the people that they work for, tend to be different. So, what that means is so many of our labor laws that protect employees don't protect incarcerated workers, right? And that's just a matter of interpretation. The fourth feature, and I'm sorry, back continuing with unprotected, they also can't organize, they can't, there's no workplace protections, there's no whistleblower protections. So there's a whole range of things that the law just says, no, it's not our concern. Workman's comp is another example, and you had mentioned that earlier, Margie. The fourth is that it's just not related to reentry or rehabilitation, right? And so this is what people talk to me about, where they literally are just picking grass out between slabs of concrete, right? Where the work just seems like more of a punishment than something that is part of a reentry plan or workforce development. So, with those 4 points in mind to understand the differences between the two systems, we can then think about what are the types of jobs that people are doing, right? And so much of this labor is about, in fact, maintaining the institution. This is kitchen, this is laundry, this is medical orderlies providing care for our aging and graying prison population. They do a lot of the administrative and clerical work that's required to run these institutions. And so, in so many ways, they are taking jobs that could, in fact, be performed by other people, free people in the community, who then would have an opportunity to demonstrate the ways in which the free world labor economy works. So there's maintaining the institution. They may work for a private corporation, both behind the wire or outside of the wire. So behind the wire, there's a number of companies that have established kind of mini plants. You think about like e-recycling centers, for instance, are
Mm.
one example. And then there are those that, like Tyson, operate meat processing plants on the outside in which incarcerated workers also work. And it's not just private corporations. Baltimore County, for instance, uses incarcerated workers in its recycling plant who work alongside free workers, and yet are treated very differently because of their incarcerated status. Um, so a lot of this work is not just prison based either. It includes people who are in immigration detention increasingly, particularly those that are privately run. And courts have upheld that as a form of fiscal contribution or as housekeeping duties and responsibilities. But they too can be punished with solitary if they don't complete the job as ordered. Jails People who are held pretrial are also being forced to work, and then people who are being convicted are also forced to work in a variety of different jobs. Sometimes that job happens in really dangerous situations. And so I mentioned that I work on mortality. I look at deaths. We have workplace related deaths. For instance, we have deaths of people who were working on boats in the Mississippi River, work that they may not have been trained for, who then drowned as a consequence of being assigned to that job. We have someone who was assigned to check water meters and was riding in the back of a pickup truck. The truck turned, hit a bump, they fell out the back and had a traumatic brain injury and died as a result of that job. What I think is probably one of the more egregious examples is, Matt started this conversation about how incarcerated workers have helped in disaster cleanup and work. And I think when I talk to incarcerated people, their ability to help someone in need, to help communities in need, is a point of pride. And it's something that they're proud to have done. But because of their incarcerated status, they can be asked to do dangerous things upon pain of punishment that they could not ask a free worker to do. And then when it comes afterwards to sue for damages, to get the type of relief that's needed, there's so many barriers to their care. So I want you to think about the BP oil spill, for instance. Cleaning up that oil from the animals from the beaches was an incredibly toxic experiment. We know and have documented significant lifelong health injuries for people who were involved in that cleanup effort, right? At the same time, incarcerated workers were sent out there with no safety gear. When it came time for the class actions to address that care, they also were not included in those settlement options. They were essentially a forgotten worker force that wasn't included. And so we need to think critically about when incarcerated labor is appropriate, what choice people have in engaging in that work, and to ensure that they are not put in a position that is more dangerous than a free worker who is trained to do that particular task. I hope that was helpful in understanding the range and the breadth and depth of forced labor, because it is literally, as you let us off with, Margie, it is everywhere in the US economy, political, and social system.